This video is going to take you through the formation of estuaries. Now, estuaries are formed where the river enters the sea. So we know that rivers flow from their source in upland areas all the way down through the upper course, through the middle course, into the lower course, and eventually they get to their mouth by the sea or ocean. So here is our ocean. And here is our river. It's got a wide channel because it's in the lower course and it's been eroded laterally. Let's get that wide channel. Great, so we've got the wide channel. The banks have been eroded laterally. And in the lower course, deposition is the most dominant process. What is deposition? Well, deposition is when a river puts down the load that it is transporting. Why does deposition happen? Well, deposition happens when the river loses energy. So we know that lots of deposition happens at the river mouth. And estuaries are formed from that deposition. So why is the river losing energy here at the river mouth? What's happening? Well, if you go down to the coast, you'll notice that sometimes the sea is right up to the bottom of the cliffs, and sometimes the sea is right out in the distance, you can't see it. The sea moves in and it moves out with the tides. And that affects the water level in the river. When the sea moves in, the water level is going to be higher. As the tide goes out, the water level will be lower. When the tide is coming in, it stops the water in the river flowing into the sea. Let's draw that as a diagram. We've got the tide coming in, and we've got the water flowing down the river here once getting to the sea. But because of the tide coming in, the water doesn't flow straight into the sea. What is going to happen to the velocity of the river at high tide? If the water can't flow into the sea at high tide, what's going to happen to that velocity? Well, the velocity of the river, the speed at which the river is flowing, is going to fall. And when the velocity falls, or when the flow of the river slows down, it loses energy. And what happens when a river loses energy? Well, it deposits material. So during high tide, the water is unable to be discharged into the sea, it's unable to flow into the sea, the river velocity falls, and sediment is deposited in the middle of the river channel. We call that a mudflat. The river also deposits some sediment in the river banks, creating wide and muddy river banks. So we've got mudflats in the centre of the channel, and we've got muddy, wide river banks at the sides of the river as well. You tend to only see these mudflats and the river banks when the tide is low, so when the water in the ocean is out at sea. So when the tide turns again, when there's low tide, the water flows out to sea. So the important features of the estuary are that the water level in the river rises and falls every day, and that we get a lot of deposition because when there's high tide, the water can't flow into the sea, which means that it loses energy, creating those mudflats and the muddy, wide river banks.